Well, 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 as Ben would say, here we are. Hello, Ed.
Hello, John. How are you this evening?
I'm very good, mate. It's great to see you. And thank you very
And
much
you.
for coming along again to go down the rabbit hole with Ed the Techie.
That's always fun coming on here.
And of course, some of the people may never have seen your face before, and now they have. Right. He is resplendent in his beauty.
No, I'm not. I just got sick of being freaking harassed about not doing video. I actually bloody hate. I mean, I have to minimize all the windows, and I never watched the shows back again afterwards. So people can just deal with it or not. But if people prefer the video, then this is 2023, I suppose, and video has well and truly killed the radio star.
Yeah, so this is the Soham murders that we're going to go into tonight is one that you've done a lot of research into this previously before you became a man. Don't read anything into that may you may think he wasn't a man at any point. But I mean, as a mere callow youth, I think that you were very interested in this, weren't you?
Yeah, well, it was on because the murders happened in 2002, and so it was just after 9/11, and it was sort of the beginning point of my sort of 10-year blogging career on codshit.com. And one of the reasons that I chose this one is because I've actually still got some old material on the site, which is just not online anymore. Yeah. And there's a very interesting chap called Joe Viles. Joe, as in Joe, and Viles, which is Vialls, and you don't see that name.
As in like a vial of poison or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was this mysterious character that popped up around late 2001, and he had this really simple website, and he used to post really fascinating stuff and really interesting takes on different world events, starting with 9/11 and stuff like that. And I mean, there's all sorts of rumors about who he was. He always wrote as if he was in Australia.
Yeah.
But there are also rumors that he might have been connected to Israeli intelligence. Or, I mean, I did read one rumor that he was Ari Ben Menashe, who's he was in the Mossad. I think he might have been head of the Mossad, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's a very, this is an interesting perspective because there's a few aspects to the Soham case which have always raised red flags for me.
Yeah, and of course, you didn't have as much time to research for this one as you would normally because it was your birthday last week.
Yes, it was. It was my 50th birthday, which
happy birthday,
a whole half
sir.
Century. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a great weekend with my family, who I don't see very often. So it was really special.
And did you go out to the Netherlands?
No, they came. My mum and my stepdad came to the UK. And,
all right, okay, cool.
My sister-in-law arranged an absolutely swanky house in Kent.
Nice.
And we just had a really nice weekend of eating and drinking and talking and eating and drinking and talking and stuff.
Cool, that's cool.
And I got some. Yeah, no, it was really good. So
Ben's done a lot of sucking up here. I don't know if he's been drinking Coke again. Because he said, "You look wonderful, Ed," right? And then he said, "You do not look 50, and I have spent the day with you." Just as well, it was just the day and not the night, huh?
Well, I take that as a compliment. And I'd like to remind Ben that he's married as well.
Yes. So wind your neck in, Ben. Right.
Oh, dear.
So, shall we get on with it? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Let me just change my window so I can keep up with the slides. My thinking is let's go through the official story just to remind people. There may be people who don't know about the deaths of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
I just refreshed the slides in case you've changed the order, but everything seems to be okay.
Yeah, I added a few last minute, but
Right.
not
Okay.
much.
How many? How many do you reckon we have? 14?
Slides we've got. Yeah, there's not a huge number of
Yeah.
slides because
Okay.
when you
Okay.
go hunting for pictures, it all gets very, very samey. And
Mm.
the picture of the two girls in their red football shirts was, I mean, it was plastered all over the news at the time. It was the whole case had there were aspects of it that felt very narrativey when you look back with the
Hmm.
hindsight of having survived 3 years of clown world in 2023.
Yeah.
And you go back over old stories, there are things that you can just see where they're attempting to push the narrative. But let's just run through the official story and then we can get into the
Well,
more
please do
rabbit hole stuff.
because I'm not really up to speed on this one either. So this is more like true crime than cryptids.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, there's actually been a true crime episode about the Soham murders,
yeah.
and there's been, I mean, untold in the years since they've had documentaries and they've had newspaper articles and interviews, and the official explanation is that Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were murdered by a man called Ian Huntley, who was a caretaker at their school, who was assisted by a woman called Maxine Carr, who was a teaching assistant, I think, or a supply teacher. No, I don't think she was a main teacher. I think she was a teaching assistant. And yeah, there's just aspects of it that are weird. But the disappearance of the girls in August 2002 just created massive speculation, and everyone was really involved. It was, like I said, it was a true narrative event.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was, it was constantly on the news, and first of all it was the disappearance and then the bodies were found, but it's the first interesting thing is that the bodies were found near a US Air Force base called RAF Laken. We'll get to the slides for that in a minute.
Just to keep us up to speed on this, so when did this occur?
4th of August 2002.
2002, sorry. Right. And did they disappear from school, or what happened?
Well, they intended a barbecue.
Right. Okay.
At home.
Right.
No, at Holly Wells' parents' house. And that was in Soham in Cambridgeshire. And after that, they just mysteriously vanished.
Right.
And there was a 2-week search, media frenzy.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, they had people out, they had dogs, they had search parties. And unfortunately, it ended up with the chilling discoveries of 2 burnt bodies near RAF Lakenheath, which is a joint US-UK Air Force base. It's also, I don't know if it still is, but it was one of the US bases that hosted nuclear weapons on UK soil.
Yeah.
And it's a big base.
Yeah.
And if you pop up, like I said, we're going to jump down the slides a little bit. But if you just pop open slide 9, you can see just how close.
Oh yeah.
So we're talking just outside the perimeter fence. Now,
why would you? I mean, this is just me speculating because I know nothing about it. But if you were going to commit murder and dump bodies, why would you go so close to such a high security installation?
Exactly. And why would you dump them together?
Yeah.
But we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I wanted to give people a visual idea of what happened.
Yeah.
So the official story is that Ian Huntley, school caretaker, who was known to the girls, was later charged, and he was charged and later convicted for the murders. Huntley's involvement presented intricacies. There was aspects of it that were a bit odd. And now they say that his guilt has been ascertained beyond reasonable doubt. But multiple theories pertain to his motives and actions still. Suspicion arose over his psychological makeup, with past suicide attempts and allegations of sexual misconduct casting long shadows on his behavioral characteristics. Despite this, Huntley managed to secure employment with the school and maintained a relationship with Maxine Carr, who's a teaching assistant at the same school. And that, I mean, okay, so the guy has psychological issues, past suicide attempts, and allegations of sexual misconduct, and he somehow still gets a job in a school. Now, I think this is 2002, so things technology-wise, and
you still needed to have some kind of clearance to work in a school, especially with children.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit bizarre.
So the speculation has been rife about the proximity of the girl's final resting place to RAF Lakenheath, as we said.
Yeah.
Did Huntley act alone? And if so, why choose such a high-risk disposal site? Which, bear in mind, this is a US Air Force base where they have nuclear weapons, and they have God knows what else. They might even have a freaking UFO or two in there. Don't know.
Of their own making.
Well, yeah, and I mean they have perimeter guards, they have watchtowers, they have sentries. It's an Air Force base, so you have a what is it called, a control center, which is high up and has a very, very good view of what's going on.
Yep.
But we do have to tread cautiously, and I do want to say that as far as the law is concerned, Huntley and Carr were guilty, and I'm not trying to call into question the legal system or the judge, or I'm not trying to upset any parents or anything like that. It's just a bit of an investigation, and I'm trying to, as with all the rabbit holes, I try and approach it with respect to the victims and families and stuff like that, because that's important. But there are still rumors of military cover-ups. There were stories about secret ceremonies, and even the old one of child sex trafficking, which wasn't so much in the public consciousness then as it is now. Yeah. But those trafficking rings have existed for a very long time.
Well, Fred and Rosemary West, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's no evidence. There's no hard evidence to substantiate any of that. So there's theories about the base's involvement, which we'll come back to in the Joe Viles account of things. And simultaneously, the broader institutional responses have repeatedly been cast in a dubious light. A few weeks into the investigation, Cambridgeshire Family Liaison Officer Detective Constable Brian Stevens appeared to uncover a new lead. Now, there's a slide for Brian Stevens.
I remember this.
And this is one of the first bits of.
Oh, sorry. What one is it?
It is slide 10.
Slide 10. Right. Okay. Yep.
So at dawn, so he's one of the. He's the family liaison officer that was working with the families, and also investigating the case. And he appeared to uncover a new lead, but we've never really been told what that lead was. Because shortly after it happened, the roof fell on his head, and his career was ended. And at dawn on the 12th,
was this did he have content on his laptop or something that he shouldn't, or his computer or something?
Well, on the 12th of September 2002, he was arrested on suspicion of child pornography offences, allegedly detected by the child pornography monitoring American project called Operation Candyman, which was run by the FBI with active CIA assistance.
Yeah, I remember that.
Another angle of speculation surrounds the subsequent arrest of the chief police investigator on the case, and that's slide 11. DCI Andy Hebb, and Andy Hebb was arrested in 2014 for possession of indecent images of children. Right, and it was an unrelated case, but it raises some eyebrows about the investigation process. And as far as Brian Stevens goes, I remember that coming up on the news at the time, and it sent the conspiracy hairs on the back of my neck tingling like crazy.
I think it sent everybody's hairs in the back of their neck. Yeah. Because it wasn't that usual to find cops in these kind of positions of power that were then getting found out with child pornography on their laptops. You know, it's not like today where it's 10 a penny.
Absolutely, and it's also the child pornography back then. I think it was relatively more difficult to get a hold of because all of those evil networks were basically just starting up, and security wasn't what it is now.
Yeah,
we didn't have the deep web back then the way that we do now, so it's much more. It was in its infancy, and it's the thing with this is that it felt like to me that he'd been set up. Now, bear in mind that even back then, people like the CIA and the FBI have got backdoors into Windows, and if they wanted to dump a folder full of whatever onto your hard drive, they would have very little problem in doing that.
Yeah.
And especially back in 2002 when Windows was even more garbage than it is now.
Yeah.
And it was done through this Operation Candyman as well. So anyway, that's just another thread. We're going to come back to that one in a little while, because obviously we should point out that correlation doesn't equal causation. And Hebb's inappropriate behavior, though despicable, does not automatically warrant suspicion of foul play in his professional capacity in the Soham case. It's very, very easy to pull out lots of conspiracies from things like that. And it's the same with the Stevens thing. And all we have is suspicion. And there's no evidence at the end of the day. This is all speculation. This is all just to get people thinking, and I guess to kind of share some of the thoughts that I had back in the day. And it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a platform for that, and to also see what other people think, to see what you think, to see what the audience thinks. So, in conclusion, while a certain degree of openness to alternate explanations can prove unhealthy in evaluating historical events, the temptation to drift towards sensationalism, uncorroborated speculation is kind of resisted, but that's not what we're here to do. Really, we're basically just here to look at the situation as to what happened, and look at some of the alternate stuff that was floating around online at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, what we've got is a watershed moment in British criminal history, characterized by a horrific crime, a defendant with a questionable past, the involvement of an international military base, a tainted lead investigator. But we still have to keep in sight that what this was all about was those two lovely kids. If you scroll up to slide 4, there's a really nice picture of them. And yeah, I mean, the murder of children is just not, it's never okay. It's not okay. And part of my questioning about these things is that convicting the wrong people and setting the wrong people up is also not okay.
Well, and it's worse than that, because it means that the people that actually did it go unpunished.
Absolutely right.
And can continue to do the same thing.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And I mean, Huntley, as convicted, acted alone, possessed a disturbing track record which devastated an unsuspecting community. The nearby US Air Force Base was an innocent bystander, and became an unwitting location for the discarding the girls' bodies. Subsequent crimes by a detective unrelated to the case, while profoundly disappointing, are not an admission of professional misconduct. These elements signify abhorrent societal failures and human depravity rather than a structured institutional conspiracy. The conspiracy perhaps lies not within the coordinated lies, but within the hidden truths of our societal system failures, which, if addressed, could preempt the recurrence of such heinous crimes. So that's the official side of things.
It's a bit pious, right? and I hate to say it, and again, people probably won't like me for calling out the truth, but you're never going to stop this kind of thing, you know?
No,
you just aren't, because there are people out there who are just monsters, and you know, you don't know who they are. That's the problem. And
Well, that's the thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you can't know who they are unless you control everyone's life to a minutiae that just can't be accepted by anyone, you know. So you just can't stop these things happening. They will happen, and they'll continue to happen as long as humans are human. Unfortunately,
Absolutely. And yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think that it's I like to try and do justice to the official story.
Yeah.
So as to avoid, well, not avoid, but to fend off a few accusations about being biased and stuff like that. So,
I mean, we don't have any skin in the game here. I mean, we're just looking at this as dispassionately as you can, because obviously this kind of situation does tug on the heartstrings, you know, but especially when you've got, you know, such lovely looking kids, and then
so
knowing,
sad.
you know, and then knowing what's happened to them. So yeah, it does tug on the heartstrings, but you know, if we'll push through and see, because I'm sure there's always loose ends in every case,
Absolutely.
and this one I seem to remember there was quite a few loose ends or red herrings that get thrown up, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of red herrings, but at the same time there are a lot of interesting threads. So with that, let's go down the rabbit hole and look at this from a different perspective. Now, when the police arrested Huntley and Carr in the early hours of Saturday, the 17th of August, it was on the suspicion and abduction of the two girls. And they did so in the certain knowledge that absolutely no hard evidence existed incriminating either suspect. The reason for the rapid arrest was very simple. Just 2 hours earlier, the bodies had been found near the perimeter fence at USAF Lakenheath, and the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street was terrified of a massive political scandal involving American servicemen based in or transiting through the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Bearing in mind that this is 2002, we're in between 9/11 and the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
Blair was doing his "I'm going to be Bush's poodle" and be a warmonger. And so Blair was shoulder to shoulder with Bush. I mean, the number of pictures you got there were at that time of those two guys standing together, it's just craziness. So if something happened involving American service personnel, particularly brutal murders like that, the amount of uproar it would have caused in the country, I suspect would have made it much more difficult for Blair to offer blind support to the US, because people would just be up in arms about it. Now, shortly after the arrest, the American and British, the British and American media started demonizing Huntley and Carr so successfully that public attention was diverted away from Lakenheath completely and focused instead on the young couple from Soham who had earlier willingly spoken to television crews about their concerns for the well-being of the two missing 10-year-old girls. Now, I went on a hunt twice, and literally hunting for a couple of hours in each case, and I could not for the life of me find the original interview that Ian Huntley gave to the media. There's a lot of subsequent ones, but there was one right at the start, which is the one that's being referenced here, which is just from what I've been able to find, it's not available. And if there's anyone out there who knows where there is a copy of it, then let me know, because I'd like to get a hold of that. So we've got the caretaker, and he was a school caretaker, so the girls would have known him.
Yeah.
As well as school kids would know a caretaker in some cases. Yeah, I mean, they certainly would have seen him every day and would have been familiar with him. And also Maxine Carr was a former teaching auxiliary in the girls' class.
Yeah.
Millions of viewers around the world watched Ian and Maxine being interviewed by the media, and most were impressed by the openness of their statements and their genuine willingness to help, if possible. Experts in non-verbal communication also noticed that Ian and Maxine's involuntary body and eye movements perfectly match what they were saying verbally to the journalists. In other words, both appeared to be telling the truth, both verbally and non-verbally, which is almost impossible for a trained liar to fabricate. You can be a very good liar, and you can have someone that's an expert in body language look at you and tell you straight away that you're talking out of your bum.
Yeah.
Where are we? Now, it is critical to note that they just initially in the interviews at the very start, they just seemed like two normal people. But that reality later on started being challenged by the police, psychiatrists. There was a concerted effort to demonize them. And that's gone on since, because everything that you could find online about the case now, certainly video-wise, it's all makes the assumption of their guilt, which is okay. They've been convicted, fair enough. But here's some questions for you. If Huntley and Carr had been involved at all with the abduction and murder, why would they then have been stupid enough to run the gauntlet of about 10,000 American servicemen en route and dump the two small bodies in a location clearly visible from Lakenheath Control Tower, taxi track, and main runway? Let's pop up that map of Lakenheath again. Now, a serviceman with detailed knowledge of activities and procedures inside the base might get away with it unseen, but not a couple of civilians from Soham. The perimeter would be an ideal dumping ground for American servicemen eager to return back to the safe territory of USAF Lakenheath before either entering their barracks on the base or catching a shuttle bus to US, because there's another one called Mildenhall that's not that far away from Lakenheath. So this is what people need to bear in mind, is that this whole area is crawling with US service personnel, either off-duty guys outside of the base. Base is full of personnel. Then we get into some of the strange things that the police did. And in an attempt to demonize Huntley still further, police leaked the information that he'd been arrested for rape a number of years earlier, which actually, when you look into it, turns out it was he was a teenager at the time, and he'd had consensual sex with his girlfriend, but the girlfriend was 15, so it was statutory rape.
And he was what age?
He was still a teenager. I'm not sure exactly. He was probably 18 or 19.
So he had a statutory defense in effect.
Yeah. But he wasn't charged either. And his former girlfriend, when this was made, she was 21. Confirmed it was a mutual crush. With enthusiastic sexual consent on both sides. So for a while at least, police and media have managed to deflect attention away from the two massive bases at Lakenheath and Mildenhall. The political minefield lurking just below the surface, if the British public would ever find out that there are very large numbers of children abused, raped, and sometimes murdered by American servicemen on overseas duty. So let's have a look a bit more at the American connection now. If you pop up slides 12, there's 3 savoury characters. We're not going to, or unsavoury characters rather, we're not going to go into a massive amount of detail of them. But that was the 1995 Okinawa incident, which was absolutely horrific. I don't want to go into too many details about the actual incident because of the YouTube channel and stuff. But if people are interested, look it up. And it was an absolutely brutal rape of, I think it was Japanese kids or something like that. It was horrible, by these 3 monsters.
And there was an incident in Scotland near Dunoon from the Faslane base, in which an American serviceman had been caught with some of the local sheep.
Oh dear! Yeah, I guess
the farmer caught him actually in the act. Because he was keeping an eye on his sheep, because after the guy had finished his liaison, he would leave the sheep on its back, and of course sheep can't get up because of their stupid shape. So if he left it on its back, its lungs would fill up with fluid, and the poor sheep would asphyxiate itself.
Which is a horrible. I mean, that's just evil. I mean,
yeah.
Who? Just,
well,
what the hell is wrong with this species of ours? Oh yes. My God!
He was similar to these guys as well in appearance and colour.
So. Very early in the investigation, the police declared that they'd be interviewing 700 known sex offenders of British nationality, but there was no mention of interviewing the 10,000 plus US servicemen based in close proximity to Soham village, or determining which other American servicemen had transited through the two bases on which flights since Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman first disappeared. The simple fact that Holly and Jessica's bodies were found within yards of Laken Heath's perimeter fence, which in turn provides access to the American barracks, and it should have had. I mean, the police should have been knocking on Laken Heath's door immediately, asking for any kind of CCTV footage, or interviewing perimeter guards, or interviewing control tower personnel. But I think that the fact that they didn't, possibly, I would imagine that there are sovereignty issues with an American base, because the American base is probably considered US territory.
I think it is considered US territory, but
yeah, so,
there obviously needs to be a degree of
new Ko-fi subscription from Mark.
You would
Thank
think
you, Mark. Sorry, we got a new subscription there, so the siren goes. You don't hear it because it would cause an echo, but the siren went off, and we have a new Ko-fi subscription from Mark. Thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate it.
Excellent. That's always nice to hear. So you British police would have no jurisdiction on a US Air Force base. However, there are American military police, and one would think that there would potentially be some kind of liaison between them, saying, look, this has happened.
Yeah, there should be a degree of cooperation. Yeah.
Now, let's cover a few examples of some, just to prove that there's a bit of history for this, that I'm not just making this stuff up about American service personnel. And for the record, I have a lot of respect for people who serve in the military, and I'm not trying to tar all of them with the brush by saying that they're all monsters, but monsters lurk among us everywhere.
Well, it's like we said earlier, and the thing is, Ed, every walk of life is a microcosm of society. So you've always got good people, which hopefully outnumber the bad people, right? But then you've always got a bad element, a bad amount, and they will be there somewhere.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most of them seem to be in positions of power. At least they are in 2023.
Well, so psychopath and sociopath has good traits for getting into positions of power.
Yeah, CEOs as well. So I couldn't find a picture of him. But we've got Staff Sergeant Frank Rongi, who on the 24th of August 2000 pleaded guilty to sodomizing and killing an 11-year-old Kosovar girl in January of that year. A member of his platoon testified that Sergeant Rongi disdainfully claimed it's easy to get away with this shit in a third world country. The shit Rongi referred to, described here by US Army pathologist for Europe. All right, I'm not going to go into that bit. Sorry. Yeah, that's just too much detail.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, well, her right jaw was fractured, practically bisected. There was the usual evidence following a rape in her various body cavities. And there was trauma to her neck muscles, the trachea and carotid artery, and in fact, there was evidence of blunt trauma as the parent child was apparently beaten, choked, and forced to kneel. Now, it's impossible to list here all these kinds of attacks, and I don't want to go into it in too much detail because it's just depressing for everybody.
Yeah.
But they do happen, and I mean we've got Abu Ghraib and stuff like that. There's also in 1955 an American soldier was sentenced to death for the murder of a 6-year-old in Okinawa. Although that sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. During 1966, a U.S. soldier confessed to strangling a young waitress. In 1972, U.S. soldiers were sentenced to life imprisonment for strangling local women. In 1975, a U.S. soldier was sent to prison for raping 2 junior high school students. Yeah. And then there's then Okinawa, which is there's been a lot of protests in Okinawa by the residents to try and get rid of the massive US base there.
There are 58 US bases in Okinawa, I think.
Is it 58? I didn't even know that. Wow.
It is something ridiculous.
So the whole island is basically just one big US base.
Yeah, basically the whole island is effectively a US base. And the Japanese have been protesting quite ferociously against the continued US occupation of it.
And I mean, the Okinawa incident in 1995 was, again, it was brutal. It was the hammering death of two young women. 2 children were killed by a drunken soldier, and 3 US soldiers brutally raped a young schoolgirl. In January 2000, a US seaman was sentenced for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old Japanese girl. And that's the ones that I've just reeled off are just part of the list. So there is a history of this.
Yeah.
The last point to consider before returning back to the plight of Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr is the strange fate of 4 wives at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, which is the former home base of Staff Sergeant Rongi, who I mentioned before. All 4 wives were allegedly killed by their sergeant husbands when they returned from active duty in Afghanistan during the same week that Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman went missing. And I've not been able to find out for certain, but there are rumors that all of those soldiers were actually taking an anti-malarial drug. I can't remember the name of it. But there's basically 2 types of malaria drug, and one of them has serious mental side effects and can actually make people go psychotic. Now, there are no direct flights out of Afghanistan to the USA, meaning that all American servicemen, including those who've been affected by PTSD or are under the influence of other psychotropic meds or whatever, they have to change aircraft in either Germany or in the UK.
Yep.
And it's normally at USAF Mildenhall.
Yep.
So one has to wonder whether there's a connection there. And it's as I said, it's all speculation. If you pop up slide 8, there's some footage from where the bodies were discovered, and that actually gives you a really good idea of just how close we're talking to the perimeter fence.
Bloody hell, yeah.
And as you can see around the inside of the perimeter fence, you've got what appears to be a path, which is most likely for sentries or... So the Huntley and Carr were arrested on suspicion of abduction and murder. The police knew they didn't have any evidence that actually incriminated both subjects. So what happened? Why was that all done so quickly? I mean, it was almost like they went looking for someone, and someone that was convenient, and someone had a bit of a past, and he happened to be going out with someone else who was connected to the school, and they decided to chuck both of those 2 to the wolves in order to save a scandal, what would have been a gigantic scandal. I mean, you have to understand how big a story this was, and if it had been released at the time.
Was there something about phone hacking in this story? No.
Rings some bells, but I'm not sure if it's this one or another one.
Yeah.
I don't think Files might cover it, because I'm basically I pulled a couple of the articles from codshit.com, and if you go there and you type in Soham, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff that I found. Quite a few, because Joe Vars was actually really active on this case for whatever reason.
Okay, so what I've got here is the notorious murder case of two 10-year-old schoolgirls in Soham, Cambridgeshire. The role played by the mobile phone cell location data in casting suspicion on the murderer, Ian Huntley, and of breaking the false alibi given to him by his former girlfriend, Maxine Carr, has been widely reported. Maxine Carr's mobile phone was shown to have been calling from Grimsby when she claimed to have been with Ian Huntley and Soham on the night Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman went missing. Did you have that? No?
No, I don't think so. We may come across it, because I've got another couple of pages.
What are the girls called?
Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
Yeah, so Jessica's prepaid Vodafone Nokia mobile phone was switched off or had run out of battery power at 6:45 on the Sunday when the girl disappeared. Good grief, she had a phone in 2002. I don't know if I had a phone in 2002.
Yeah, no, that was when it was all still little Nokia 3310s.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
Your kids didn't normally have phones in 2000.
I think it was becoming more popular with parents that just worried about their kids. I mean, the kids weren't spending the same amount of time on their phones that they do now.
Yeah.
Back then, it was much more for mum and dad to be able to get hold of them if they needed them, and for them to contact friends and stuff.
Yeah, so it's not so much phone hacking as just phone records that they were digging through, and one of these things was a refutation of his alibi. Yeah.
So where are we at? Let me just find my notes. So there's it seems like a pretty hasty cover up. There's aspects of it which it was almost like someone somewhere in a position of stratospheric political power wanted Huntley and Carr convicted of murder, jailed for life, and the case closed forever really quickly.
Oh, hold on. Something's coming in. What is it? Oh, Madeline who? Madeline? No, I've lost it. I've lost it.
But there's loads of these stories. It's like kids go missing all the time. It's one of the reasons that I kind of wanted to cover this, because it kind of shows people just how far back this type of thing goes.
Yeah.
And it's whoever it was that wanted this thing closed down, they demonstrated a very obvious ability to manipulate three different police forces: the Metropolitan Police, the Home Office in London, and the American FBI.
Yeah.
And you just have to ask yourself who is capable of wielding that kind of power. Most likely Deep State or whoever was,
or
because we know,
or it was Huntley and Carr that did it. Or well, not Carr. Carr didn't do it. She just provided the alibi, didn't she?
Yeah. I mean, that's. I'm not contradicting that. I'm just saying that there are some inconsistencies here. And those inconsistencies, when you weave them together into a little bit of a narrative, they start to suggest something else. So then we have a few weeks after the investigation, a few weeks into the investigation, we have this issue of Brian Stevens, who supposedly had seemed to uncover a new lead. And then, boom, his career is over, and he's out of the force. He's been arrested on child porn.
Yeah,
reputation in tatters. And his actual arrest was manipulated by the officials at the Home Office using Metropolitan Police Anti-Pornography Unit, known as Operation OR. So you have Operation Candyman in the US, and Operation OR, in the UK.
It's not like the British government would take any interest in what's happening in the world of social media, or interfere in corporations as they go about their business. Is it?
Let's not go there.
Yeah, okay. Let's not.
Especially today. Oh my God, we could just disappear down another bloody rabbit hole.
We would be down another rabbit hole. Would not be coming back. Would not be coming back up for air.
Yeah. So what we've got, and you got to think about this. We've got one of the lowest ranking officers on one of the smallest British county police forces, being silenced and discredited by the FBI, the CIA, the Home Office, and the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
But the charges didn't stick, and they're finally dropped by the CPS on the 21st of August 2003. So the poor bastard had to go through.
So how did the charges not stick?
I'm not sure. They were basically the CPS dropped the prosecution.
Long after the Huntley and Carr thing was wound up, obviously.
Yeah, pretty much. But then, on the 12th of September 2003, West Midlands Police arrested him again. And today he stands accused of conspiring to pervert the course of justice. But as always,
Stevens?
But as always, the devil lies in the detail. So in order to understand the level of deception surrounding this crime and its international implications, it's necessary to take a very long trip down memory lane and follow the step of the fatally flawed investigation in an attempt to sort of try and cut through some of the government and media lies and stuff like that. Now, shortly after Huntley and Carr were arrested, the media swung into action. And that's one of the things that I found very suspicious at the time, that it was almost this innocent until proven guilty until proven innocent kind of thing that we're seeing now. And the attention was just focused on them. It was the same as Osama bin Laden being announced as the perpetrator of 9/11, practically whilst the buildings were still standing.
Yep.
And it seems to me, and it seemed then, and it still seems like it was some sort of attempt to kind of distract attention away from Lakenheath. That the media focus was always on Soham and Huntley and Carr. And when you actually look at the map, it could have been just as easily called the Lakenheath murders, because it was actually closer to Lakenheath than it was to Soham.
Yeah.
I mean, the two, Huntley and Carr, they spoke to reporters to start with, which is now, people now look back on it and say, oh God, they're two brutal, cold-hearted killers because they were just having a normal conversation with the journalists.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I'd like to ask, if I may.
Sure.
I'm assuming that the kids weren't killed and burned at the scene of where they were discovered.
No, I've never had that impression. I think it's...
But it's not explicit.
No. I mean, it's not really known because of the state that the bodies were in when they were found.
Yeah.
I think it must have been really difficult to actually ascertain. I mean, you could figure out that they'd been strangled and raped, but actually having enough information to be able to determine a kind of time and place of death is more difficult. But you would think that it wouldn't have happened right outside the US Air Force Base.
That's what I was thinking. If you're going to set people on fire, you wouldn't be doing it on the perimeter of a nuclear, of a US Air Force base that holds nuclear weapons, would you? Could you think they might be a little bit touchy about that?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's just
which in some respects tends to take away from would the US servicemen have done it, because again, they're not going to set them on fire within sight of their own control tower, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that's absolutely right. But at the same time, if it was someone on the base, then they would potentially know the procedures, and they would know when sentries would be there and all that kind of thing.
Sorry, Andrew's made a valid point, right? And yeah, imagine Bleach being involved in a bathroom. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, have you seen the amount of bleach my wife uses? Bloody hell, you'd think she was murdering 3 people a week.
Oh, was that just... Oh, dear. 3 people a week.
Maybe she is.
It's... Yeah, I mean, there's issues. The other thing I find interesting is that there was no mention of interviewing any of the US service personnel. What service personnel might have transited through. The bases were basically just completely off limits, and all of the focus was on Huntley and Carr. And I've always just found that suspicious, because when you tie it together with how desperate Blair was to support Bush, the implications of a scandal involving US military personnel, the utter evil that Tony Blair represents, in terms of his, we've got people like John Smith, we have people like Robin Cook, we have people like David Kelly, all of whom were somehow in the way, and all of whom ended up not being in the way after dying suddenly. So yeah, I mean, that's it. As far as the presentation goes, I don't know if there's questions or if people have got comments, things I got wrong, anything like that. But if maybe you've got questions. But yeah, the floor is open.
Right.
Is there anything in chat?
Just looking. Anybody in the chat get anything? Forensics of the bathroom of Huntley's house released during the trial. Remember bleach being involved. And then Andrew says, surely not on the carpet. Who has carpet in the bathroom? And if you do, can I just say that you've made an error?
Oh dear. But yeah, it's a fascinating rabbit hole. I mean, just the characters involved, some of the media shenanigans, I find it really suspicious. I mean, that thing about Stevens was absolutely one of the things that originally got me wondering about alternate explanations to what happened, because it just seemed so it's almost he went from zero to hero.
Yeah.
And there's all of this, and then he's off the case. There's all of this material against him, supposedly, and then 11 months later, the whole thing is just kind of dropped, and it's not. I don't even think it made front page news.
It's a bit suspicious, that.
It really is. I mean, it's just like I said. There's aspects of this case that just never completely made sense to me.
Espresso Mechanic says, I don't remember the bodies being burned. But I'll bow to your superior researching there.
Let me take a look. I'm pretty sure they were. But I might be wrong. It's a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, the official thing I got from the research is that they were burnt. But That might be wrong. I didn't. I mean, I didn't source check absolutely everything, so I didn't have time.
So, why did they think that? What was the reason for thinking that he shouldn't have been working in a school because of his criminal records check if they'd done one properly?
Well, the thing is that all of this stuff came out afterwards as well. It was like the sexual rape allegation against him when he was a teenager.
That won't wash because that one he was never charged, so it wouldn't go down. That wouldn't be on a CRB check.
No,
it wouldn't come up.
And it's the way that he was demonized after he was arrested by the media. Not arrested by the media, but he was demonized by the media after he was arrested by the police.
Yeah.
I really struggle to think how someone like that. I mean, all of the documentaries and stuff point at his character and how he's really devious and a good liar, and he strung Maxine Carr along and manipulated her into helping him. And he somehow, I think one of the theories was that he'd picked the girls up after the barbecue and they recognized him and he'd offered them a lift and driven them off to whatever, which is, I mean, it's plausible. The official story has been, it's been run through a lot, and there's a lot of evidence, you could say.
Yeah.
Although a lot of it is just character analysis and interviews and mistakes that Huntley and Carr, and mistakes that Huntley and Carr made in interviews and mobile phone data. I think it was I seem to recall it being one of the first times that...
that's what I was reading out earlier about, the mobile phone data was indicating that she was in Grimsby when she said she was in Soham. But I mean, from my experience, I get more suspicious if people don't make mistakes in interviews.
Well, you would think so, because people, I mean, especially if you're being interviewed by the police, you're sitting in a very uncomfortable environment. You've just been brought through a police station, so you've just seen God knows what, and it's you're very conscious of the seriousness. And I'd be stammering like an idiot. I mean, it's inevitable that you'd make mistakes. You probably contradict yourself. So, I mean, it's one of the reasons I thought it would be an interesting topic to cover was your background as a policeman, and to see what your gut instincts were saying about some of the questions that I've raised about. I mean, why the hell would you dump two bodies of two little kids that you've just murdered next to a bloody US Air Force base? I mean,
well, to me, that's like misdirection.
Well, in what sense?
Someone has put them there because it throws the blame towards the US rather than towards the locals.
Okay. So you think that was maybe something that Huntley was potentially thinking when he did that?
Oh, if Huntley did it, yeah, possibly, because if you were transiting through the base, you probably find that they weren't really allowed out. So you could probably take that element out of the equation. The people that are based there, yeah, they do go in and out on a daily basis, but they're not going to be. Generally, I would say they wouldn't be stupid enough to leave the body so close to where they live,
That's also a fair point.
So I think it reeks to me of someone putting them there deliberately to misdirect the police towards looking at the base, which would be a complete... Well, the police didn't look at the base because they probably got shut down by Tony and the government, because, as you know, at that time, it was a very sensitive situation, and the Americans had a bloody nose, not less than a year ago, I think. So they were probably a bit sensitive to being accused of things. But yeah,
absolutely.
That one's the Maxine Carr covering for him. I can understand that because people do that when they think they're in love and whatever. Why did he need cover? Where was he? Was he just on his own? Or see, this is the thing, because if you're on your own, you don't have an alibi, right? Okay. And the thing is, he'd actually have been better. He'd been better saying he was on his own than trying to get someone to do an alibi for him, because when that gets found out, it just makes you seem more guilty. But again, that's just circumstantial evidence. That's not hard evidence. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that much about the case. I mean, I'd be looking to see if was there any DNA or anything. Was there fingerprints? Was there any material found in his house? Was there? How did the bodies get to that location? Whose car were they taken in? You know,
absolutely. I mean,
so there's a lot of questions that.
I mean, there's a whole bunch. Like I said, there's an episode of True Crime that covered this, and there's multiple documentaries. There's also a lot of very sensational or sensationalist media coverage.
Yeah.
One of the big questions that
sensational media coverage? Surely not.
Exactly. I mean, one of the questions that I always had, and this applies whether it was Huntley or whether it was someone else, let's say, why would one leave the bodies where they could be relatively easily discovered and not bury them in a deep hole somewhere?
Yeah, I think you're back to either they were disturbed while they were dumping them off, or two, they were there deliberately to misdirect.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a completely fascinating case. Yeah. I mean, obviously the jury's out and there've been people convicted of the crime. We can't forget that. Yeah. But there are still some interesting questions.
So see this middle one. I wish my evil brother Huntley was dead. Why did his brother think he was evil? Was it just because of what had happened, or did he have something else?
I don't know. It's the same as people saying they wish they'd turned him in.
Yeah.
And it was very much trial by media. It really was. But then when you look back on it from 2023 and you look at how blatant the media has been over the last 3 years, and I mean, the media's always, there have always been issues with them, but I feel like their true colors have been revealed, and the kind of, and I feel like that's the same with the government as well, in a lot of ways, that there's so much, for me personally, has changed over the last 3 years in terms of how I view authority. And I mean, my trust levels have always been pretty low, but now they're kind of floating around near the Earth's core kind of thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So that was Rabbit Hole. The only thing we have to figure out is what we're going to do next time.
Interesting. What shall we do next time?
Well, we have, if there's any listeners that have got any suggestions, we do have a list. We could, let's see, we've got things like the Roanoke, we have the Malaysian Airlines disaster, we have John Lennon, we have Sasquatch, Yeti, that sort of thing. We've got Tartaria and the mud floods. We have the Schumann resonance. I think, why didn't we pick something, because this one was real lifey, sort of murdery type.
Yeah, pick thing. Something a bit more esoteric. Yeah.
I mean, I'd be quite interested in looking into the whole Tartaria thing, if you're interested in that, because
let's have a look at that. Let's get down the Tartaria route.
Yeah, let's do that, because
orphan trains and things like, and world fairs.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the buildings and some of the claims that the buildings were already there, and
and
just got rid of loads of people and massacres and stuff. It's a fascinating one, and I'm super skeptical about it.
Yeah, but there's good pictures about it as well. So, and I
absolutely.
I what I would encourage people to do actually is while you're wandering about, particularly in the older sections of your town or village or city, have a look at some of the what appear to be very old buildings and see if they've got any underground windows, and see if the doors are too high for the street, i.e. they've all got steps up to the doors. So just have a look and see what you think, because you'll be surprised at how many houses and buildings seem to have windows that are half buried. You know? And you think, why would one build a house like that?
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And there's also, but then there is also a friend of mine who may well be listening to this, although I didn't send him the link, but I'll send it to him after the show. But he translates Latin, and he speaks really good Latin. So that's going to be useful. I mean, but he translates King John's, because he's retired now, so it's something that he kind of does for fun. And he translates King John's letters from. Christ, he's going to kill me because I can't even remember what year it is. But we're talking 500, however many years ago, long time ago, and there's no mention of anything like Tartaria, or there's no missives being brought to the king describing these things, and it's a lot of history that they would have to somehow.
I mean, have you heard about the missing? Well, like the Dark Ages, and there is a school of thought, and the Dark Ages are called the Dark Ages because they actually never happened, and that we just have about 900 years of history that we've kind of made up that just never actually happened. But again, that's another rabbit hole, and one for the future, perhaps.
Yeah. Whet people's appetites a bit. It's going to be a really interesting one, and hopefully I don't have another birthday now for another year, so I'll have time to delve into this one.
You don't have an official one and an unofficial one?
I don't want to.
Well, you kind of did actually, because you kind of had the birthday the week before with us, didn't you?
I had my chasing Dissent birthday and my real birthday.
Yeah, I'm not ignoring you at all, Shalini. I'm just choosing to speak to Ed at this point in time. So I think we've pretty much decided that we'll be doing Tartaria on the next one. It's not in the South Pole, so there's a heads up for you. And we'll maybe get to the Freemasons at some point. The Knights Templar, perhaps.
Is Shalini wanting to...
Yeah, Shalini's desperate to get the Freemasons done, but we'll get there.
Well, if we do, I tell you what, because trying to figure out what bloody rabbit holes we do is difficult enough, but we can do Freemasons after Tartaria.
Yeah, okay. Right. We'll lock the next two in, so you'll get Freemasons in a month. How does that sound?
It's just good to switch between them, because...
Yeah, because Freemasons can be quite violent as well. Yeah,
and I mean the Freemasons one, I'm not necessarily sure I can keep it to an hour.
Well, yeah, we might have to start early or finish late for that one.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, thank you very much, Ed. It's been very illuminating. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, John.
And I hope you people out there have had fun and been educated suitably. So with that, good night, and remember,
good night, everybody.
It's been great for you. 'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. 'Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh
yeah, I rap with a certainty. I have a sense of urgency, a message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better. See, I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet next to me. I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future, we all start losers. We're all late bloomers, gotta struggle through the sewer. What you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make.